Welcome to DeepTech315. Our first topic is Tesla delivery numbers. They came in down 5% year over year. The whisper number was more like down 7%. They were down 9% in the March quarter. So we saw a less bad number in the June quarter, and shares rallied on that up at one point, I think 8%, kind of closed around the plus 6% range for the day after having a relatively strong week. And so we have this kind of movement higher. And the reasons for, I think, some of the improvement, I think it's just a little bit of, if you want to call it stable, more stable demand for their products, even though they're down. I think another piece to it is, more importantly, is just kind of what does this mean going forward? So Doug, as I've kind of processed this and saw the numbers and thought, well, let's put June now in the rearview mirror and think about what's going to happen going forward. Now, I just want to quickly look up notes and tell you what the street expectations were. Though for the September quarter, the street's looking for deliveries to be up 8%, and December, so it's for September, 8% again for December. For calendar 25 up 18%, and calendar 26 up 20%. And so at the most basic level, I was just kind of putting the pieces together. Investors are just seeing the path here and saying we're probably through the most difficult period and we're going to start to see better delivery rates.
And I think that is the fundamental question. I mean, we talk a lot about EVs at Deepwater, as I'm sure you can imagine. We had sort of a debate on this earlier this week. And the question was, I think the theme coming into this year was that the EV market was maybe overhyped and we were kind of due for this negative period. We've obviously had several quarters now from Tesla's perspective, but I think just the industry broadly, where it feels like we hit a temporary saturation point. I think that's a fair characterization.
Agreed.
And now, to your point, the question as we look forward, Tesla's starting to get into some easier comps, and then obviously the comps get easier as you get into some of those March and June numbers you talk about for next year. Can they hit those, kind of back to solid double-digit year-over-year growth numbers? I think if they do, I think that'd be good for the industry. It'd obviously be good for Tesla. But I think that is a fundamental question of where is that growth coming from? Is there still latent demand in the U.S.? I mean, there was a report we were talking about earlier this week, or I think it was maybe last week that it came out, that said a pretty decent percentage, I don't remember off the top of my head, of EV owners are actually considering going back to ICEs. And it kind of begs that question of, if that starts to happen, if that starts to happen, then some of these 10, 15, 20% growth numbers, I think, become harder to hit.
So your take is you're taking the under on the 18% for calendar 25 and 20% for 26.
Right now, reading the tea leaves in the market, I would take the under on it. I don't think it's drastically under. Like, I think it's in the right ballpark. But the idea of getting back to, if you're a Tesla bull, I think you have to hope you go 8, 15, 20, 25, right? And get back into the mid 20s and stay in the mid 20s to really get excited. I think that's harder to get to because I do think we're at this digestion period, and it might be kind of that crossing the chasm thing that we see so much in tech, where we had really strong early interest from early adopters, and you get kind of those early followers who want the new thing. And now you're getting to a point where it has to shift into a mainstream product. And to that data point about EV owners even thinking about going back to ICEs, maybe EVs just aren't a big enough jump in terms of improvement for the average ICE owner to get excited and get us, to that 20, 30, 40, 50% ultimately dominant market share for EVs.
Love it. My take is they will come under on that 18% for calendar 25. I think they're going to get people excited on August 8th about some new variants coming, and it'll probably take longer than expected to get those out. So that probably has that, what is it called? The Lindy effect, when they're people kind of hold off. People are going to wait. So I think there's some risk to that. And then I think that just gets pushed into 26. But either way, I think that the growth rates of deliveries are going to be improving. Maybe the 18% is 15% or 13%, but I still think it's going to be up from calendar 24. And the other piece is I'm in a slightly different place. I think that to get this to work, you need deliveries to be probably 15% a year, and you need FSD. And if they unlock that, Elon has talked, I think it was this week, about just some pretty remarkable or a step improvement in FSD once again. If they unlock that, I think that the bull case for Tesla is intact. I'll give you a final word on this one.
I think what investors should think about here, and this is always an interesting dynamic to think about, is what has consensus shifted to in the market? I think a year or two ago, consensus in the market felt like EVs are coming and they're coming really fast. They're going to take over ICEs sooner than people think. And now I think that idea has probably shifted in terms of how the market is discounting what is the future ramp of EVs. I think now the market's starting to think, okay, maybe it's going to take longer than we all thought before. And you have to ask the question in the new scenario, what's true? Is the market now right to price in a longer ramp for EVs, or could it be a little better than expected? Or is it going to take even longer than the market thinks? Does the market need to keep pushing it out? I think that's what you have to figure out if you're an EV bull or bear.
Love it. We'll jump to topic number 2, which is Phil Schiller joining OpenAI's board as an observer. So we really don't get a vote, but get to kind of sit in on the meetings. And does this ultimately mean that Apple has threaded the needle when it comes to playing catch up in AI? And just for the quick recap here, they are, of course, going to be using later this year GPT as their GPT-4 as kind of the underlying powering model for the LLM side. And then they have said publicly that they're going to be opening that up to other models like Gemini and Grok and Claude in the future. And so we see this kind of improving or this kind of expanding use of other models. But yet at the same time, even though they've said they're going to work with other parties, we have this relationship getting closer with Apple and OpenAI. And my takeaway from it was Apple's in a really strong position because despite Apple saying we're going to go to other people with this down the road, other models, and OpenAI is still giving them a board observer seat. And it feels to me like Apple has threaded the needle here. And that needle specifically is playing catch up after basically being 5 years behind, catch up in the large language model game, and ultimately be able to scale and get into the game at almost no CapEx. It's crazy if you look at Apple's CapEx kind of going up steady, mid-single digits versus the other big tech going up 15, 20%. So my takeaway is they did it. And ultimately what I think this means is that their margins are going to improve down the road.
The key, I think, insight around everything that Apple has done with AI is that the market tends to conflate technology and product as the same thing, and they're actually different. Technology enables great new products, but technology doesn't necessarily have to be the product, if that makes sense. And I think what Apple is so great at is taking what's available to them, innovating it on their own ways, making it easy to use, Appleifying it, and making it mass market. I think that's what they're doing. They're using their playbook. We should have expected this probably in hindsight with AI. I don't think that means full stop that it is good that they don't have this influence over the model, that they're not building their own true large language model, trying to break out intelligence. Time will remain, and time will tell us whether that's good or not. But it also, I think it's not that too dissimilar to how they think about manufacturing in general. I mean, they don't manufacture their own products. They're wholly reliant on supply chain in China and India to build products. And in the same vein, they are now going to be wholly reliant to deliver advanced AI features to their customers on companies like AI. Maybe they do something with Google, like you said. We'll see. But I think the question is, can they still make that great product? Can they meld AI into something that people are really excited about? And that's what I want to see in September with the launch of the new phone.
I think they can,
How
just
does
by
it
the
really
mere
work?
fact that they're making it available and that interacts with the device that that 1 point in terms of active iPhones users, call it 1.5 billion of those. I mean, that's all. It doesn't have to be some spectacular use case of an LLM. It just has to be easy for people to use for Apple to win.
I think that can be true. And then it begs a different question as it relates to Apple's business model. Is it just incremental or is it transformational? Because that's the other thing we want to know.
Right.
If it just makes your iPhone 50% better, that's probably not enough to really matter for the stock in any meaningful way to inflect, right? Like that keeps them on their current trajectory probably.
Well, one thing,
but if it makes your phone 5 times better, that's meaningful.
And time will tell on that, as you said, when we see the product, but just some sensitivity around that is ultimately what Apple can do here is offer a premium or allow an opportunity for OpenAI to offer a premium version of GPT next year, 2 years from now, and give the lower end version, the 1-year-old version away for free. Charge $20 a month. If you're curious in the math, if 10% of the active iPhone users opt into that, where they're paying Apple $20 or paying OpenAI $20 a month, Apple gets their 15% cut of that. Consider it kind of an ongoing subscription. That would yield just over $5 billion in basically pure income, operating income. That would increase their overall operating income by about 5%. And so it's still, to your point, those numbers are moving in the right direction. They're in the plus category, but they're not kind of a breakout. It's hard to do that when you're 400 plus billion in revenue. So we'll jump to our final topic, and this one's going to test my ability to pronounce names here. But one of our portfolio companies, which is Rain AI, they make an AI chip. They announced a hiring this week of JD Alagutri, and he was a senior director at Apple, and he worked for Silicon on a Chip. Think of him as probably a top 5 employee when it came to anything that's hardware or chip related at Apple. And so this is a big win for a company that most people have never heard of. And Doug, you just want to give us the quick rundown on what Rain is all about and why a typical person should be aware of what they're doing.
Rain is about creating artificial brains. So if you think about what is compute doing, what are GPUs doing in the context of AI, really the computers, the GPUs, they are the brains. The software is how all your neurons would connect if you use the brain analogy, and the GPU itself is the actual brain. What Rain is trying to do is make our current hardware paradigm much more efficient, 1,000 times more efficient than what we're seeing from the likes of NVIDIA. And the reason that's really important, if you've been following the AI space, is there's this huge question right now about how do we create enough energy, even if we can create enough chips, even if we can get more data and push more data through these models in training, how do we have enough energy to actually pull it off and then also deliver on the inference to enable these AI experiences? And so companies like Rain, I think, are critical to actually helping us live the AI future we all imagine. Because if we don't figure out the power thing one way or the other, the experience won't be there.
It's super exciting. It's one of those kind of 1 in 1,000 shots that if it hits, it could be just a game changer for the industry. And so is that the right odds, 1 in 1,000?
I think that's the right odds for most startups.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's correct. And then most of them probably don't have the same level of upside that we're thinking about with Rain. If it really works, it's a profound outcome. But the other thing I would mention too is you think about not just training, but inference in terms of why is Rain important. We're going to see a lot more AI happening on device, Apple included, right, with their neural processors. I think that is really where you start to see this low power paradigm happen first, because so many of our devices, they're on our wrist, they're in our pocket, they're in our ears. To the extent that we can do inference live right there, number one, there's security advantages to that because you don't have to send data to the cloud. People are sometimes sensitive about the data element. And there's also a latency advantage. So again, if you don't have to send that data to the cloud and wait for an answer to come down, OTA, you can do it right on device. You can have experiences that feel much like C-3PO in the movies, right? Like you can actually have a conversation with a robot real time. So that is what I think is critical. That's where power happens first, is locally, these battery powered devices. We get robotics, and then that comes to the data center and it addresses that bigger, broader power issue we talked about.
Love it. This is going to be the hardware piece, a story that's going to continue, as we'll be back next week for DeepTech315. On behalf of Doug and Gene, bye for now.